Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Silver Screen Podcast. For this newest episode, as you will see on your screens, is a review of the movie Doctor Strange. Can't imagine why we would suddenly be reviewing that as if it's somehow relevant right now. We'll leave you to work that one out. But as usual, I do not do this by myself. I am joined by my regular co-host, DK, who's bringing the facts again. Awesome. How you doing, DK? Okay?
I'm not too bad, mate. Yourself?
DK, okay. Yeah, not bad. Looking forward to talking about all things Marvel movies. As you know, we'll have already put out the first half of the top 10 Marvel movies by now, so the audience knows that we hopefully know our stuff, although that's questionable given some of our choices. But,
That's assuming we've not dropped listeners by this point.
It'd be hilarious if we've actually gained some really weird listeners that were just like, we love these movies. We're on board now. Who doesn't love Howard the Duck? Excellent. And we are joined by another special guest this week, a guest who you will be able to see myself and DK over on his Who Gameshows panel, or channel, I should say, playing the Doctor Who themed version of Richard Osman's House of Games, and that is Mr. Will. Hello, Will.
Hi. Am I your most recurring guest now on this podcast?
Other than my co-host, probably.
Well, yes, obviously.
Well, I'm saying that Toby's done a couple, so yeah.
Hard to say, really. I will surpass him in a few weeks' time.
Indeed. But yeah, so Will's joined us to talk about Doctor Strange because it was me, I think, that dragged him kicking and screaming into watching the MCU, so I know that he has seen it.
Well, last year was quite eventful. We kind of stopped doing podcasting like religiously, and we were like, okay, so now you have to watch, what you like to watch. So that's superhero films, because I never really ventured into that. And of course, when we did the podcast, you kind of introduced me to new things. I introduced you to new things, and then one of the things that I've never watched before were superhero films. So that's why I watched the MCU. And now that's why I'm going into bloody X-Men and a whole new can of worms. So the DC universe, that's not what I'm going into, though. I refuse. I'm putting my foot down and saying no.
To be fair, I already made you because we already reviewed Batman. So.
That's true, but I put my foot in the door, but I'm not going to go any further than that.
It's quite a wise choice, I think.
It's too much. Like, I know, Michael, you literally tell me about every other week, and you say, "Oh, I'm watching this show. I'm watching this show. I'm watching this show." And I say, "How many shows are you watching concurrently? Can you not enjoy one show?"
If you're doing the TV shows, yeah, you've got no chance of catching up at this point.
Exactly.
The whole connected Arrowverse, but I mean, the movies aren't that daunting, So.
Well, yeah, the movies are fine, but the TV shows are a bit much.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't expect anybody to suddenly think, "Oh, can I watch?" Let's say at this point, 8 seasons of The Flash. 8 seasons of Arrow, 6 seasons of Legends of Tomorrow, 6 seasons of Supergirl. It goes on for a while. 2 seasons of Batwoman.
Yeah.
Sorry, 3.
Doom Patrol's a pretty good one. Only 3 seasons, and it's a good laugh.
Yeah, I was going to say that stands on its own, and I have been trying to convince Will to watch that one, especially when Michelle Gomez joined in season 3, being a Doctor Who fan. I thought that might have convinced you, but it hasn't yet.
MCU's enough, and all its mid TV shows.
That's the thing, the MCUs aren't really TV shows. That's the kind of thing. I was watching a video earlier with somebody on YouTube that was frustrated because it's like they're not interested in being the TV format, with the exception of WandaVision. It's just basically we've written a super long 6-hour movie and we're just going to split it randomly into 6 parts.
Yeah,
so it has nothing to do with the conventions of TV. There's no arc in an episode or anything. It's just like, and here's the next hour's worth of stuff that happens. So,
and that's why WandaVision is the worst of the lot.
No, WandaVision is the best because it actually fits the conventions.
That's for another day then.
But no, we'll move on anyway because we're not here to talk about TV. We're talking about movies and the big screen. And Benedict Cumberbatch, who obviously took on the role of Doctor Strange in this movie. So yeah, as you will know if you've been listening to us since we took over the new format, myself and DK, you know that the plan going forward is that DK will start things off with kind of behind the scenes facts and information that we can hopefully react to and we may not know. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to DK for some information about Doctor Strange.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Right, a rumoured Doctor Strange movie had been in development since way back in 1986, but continually fell through until when the MCU version came along in 2016. Along the way pitch, it was under the helm of such notables as Wes Craven, David Goyer, and Guillermo del Toro. Oh, crikey, can't talk today. Guillermo del Toro. Yeah. Director Scott Derrickson, Sinister, an exorcism of Emily Rose director, was such a fan of the character, he spent his own money on putting together a video pitch, which got him the job, beating out Jonathan Levine and Mark Andrews. Benedict Cumberbatch, as Mike was saying, was the first choice to play Stephen Strange, but had to decline due to previous commitments. Joaquin Phoenix was the second choice, but after several months of deliberation, turned down the role as he didn't wish to sign a multi-picture contract. Luckily, by that point, shooting had been pushed back to such an extent that Cumberbatch, now free from his commitments on Hamlet, was able to sign. Now, Rachel McAdams was the first choice to play Christine Palmer. She was originally
She has nothing to do.
I know. She was originally approached to play by Favreau to play Pepper Potts in the first Iron Man, but she declined. Hence, the MCU being lumbered with a vagina candle salesperson. However, McAdams later changed the stance on the MCU movies when she saw how popular they'd become in the intervening years. So, a bit opportunistic there.
Well, as I said, she didn't get a lot to do, so she probably regrets not taking the better role.
Yeah.
Chiwetel Ejiofor had no problem during the fight scenes. I didn't know this. He's actually a 5th level black belt.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. Another piece of casting trivia. Lulu Wilson, who is a child actor in Haunting of Hill House, Ouija Oranges, and Annabelle Creation, was cast as and shot several scenes as Donna Strange, Stephen's sister. Donna died when Stephen was young, which is the impetus for him becoming a surgeon. Unfortunately, all the scenes were cut for running time.
Oh, it's a shame.
Now, the reality twisting scenes were influenced by the works of Escher, and they were so successful that not only did they confuse the shit out of Mads Mikkelsen during filming, but the movie was nominated for Best Visual Effects back in 2017 Academy Awards. Unfortunately, it lost to the live-action Jungle Book, which, bit of a kick in the guts there. Yeah,
I didn't even particularly like that movie. I must say I'm one of the few, but yeah, that wasn't that impressed with live-action Jungle Book, if I'm honest.
It had its moments, but any of these Disney remakes, they don't really do it for me. I prefer the originals, but I am an old fart, so there you go.
For the most part, I'd agree with you, but I will say the remake of Aladdin is fantastic. I don't know why.
Not bad. It's still
the Will Smith one here.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good.
Linda Louise Duan can be glimpsed in some scenes as Tina Minoru, who Marvel fans will recognize as the mother of Nico Minoru from Runaways. In the movie, she can be seen holding the Staff of One, Nico's eventual item of channeling. Now, although this marks Strange's first appearance in the MCU, it's not the first time the character has graced screens. In 1978, a TV movie. Oh my God, you really don't, do you?
IMD.
Oh shit! A TV movie was produced starring Peter Hooton as the eponymous sorcerer.
Yep.
Hooton is known for inverted comma classics such as the original Inglourious Bastards and Orca, Killer Whale, and continues to act to this. Well, if you can call it acting, to this day. It also features such luminaries as Michael Ansara and British actor John Mills.
Wow, Will was so impressed he just collapsed. He was like, the guy who plays Kang in Star Trek was in it? What's going on with that?
The movie was a pilot for a proposed TV series that never came to fruition. Stan Lee consulted on the production, and in the movie, Strange goes up against Morgan Le Fay, who comic fans will recognize as a major villain in the comic books and was played by Liz Hurley in Season 3 of Marvel's Runaways. In this version, however, she's played by Jessica Walter, who Arrested Development fans will remember as Lucille Bluth.
And Archer fans. Let's not forget that.
Oh, yes. So I can't believe you have that, Mike.
I have, I genuinely did. I think it was re-released on DVD when this movie came out, and I was like, I'm intrigued to see this. And let me just tell you, it is every bit as bad as you could possibly imagine it to be.
Yeah,
it is so cheesy. It has almost nothing like special effects wise, because you can see it was around the time of the Incredible Hulk TV show where it was like you can get one semi-decent special effect episode and that's it. so there's not really a whole lot that happens. And for some reason, inexplicably, they turned Doctor Strange from a neurosurgeon into a psychologist, which I never understood what the purpose for that was.
But he does have a fantastic hairstyle.
And a heck of a tash.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if being a doctor fails, it could always go into porn quite easily.
Oh yeah, he's got the 70s porn star look, definitely. In the course of your research, speaking of this, and forgive me if I'm stepping on your toes, did you find any information about a film called Dr. Mordred as well?
I did, but it's in one of my brain farts. It's gone again.
The only reason I mention it is because this was another attempt to make a Doctor Strange movie, but the rights basically weren't allowed to whichever company were making it. But they kept the movie basically exactly the same, but just changed the names. So it is effectively a Doctor Strange movie. It's just they're not allowed to call him that.
Yeah, it's Jeffrey Combs, isn't it?
It is Jeffrey Combs, yeah, who we obviously Star Trek fans will know as 1,000 different characters.
Yeah, I think it's actually included in this upcoming season of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Oh, wow, awesome. Cool. I have this level of knowledge of Doctor Strange, including owning that terrible 70s TV pilot. I do not know.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was especially for you. I was just lost the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, audience of Silver Screen, I am still here. I haven't done that.
Well, seriously though, if you don't shush, I will make you watch that terrible 1970s Doctor Strange. So that concludes the kind of behind the scenes stuff and things. Then what I'll do, obviously, as regular viewers will know if you're familiar with it, we tend to go in and break down the film. But I've decided to do things a little bit differently, just to shake things up, and because it was getting boring, just going sort of scene by scene, minute by minute. So what I've done is that I've broken my notes down into categories, like acting, directing, writing, scenes, themes, etc. And I'm kind of going to hit onto those, and hopefully, if you guys have done chronological notes or whatever, it'll feed into that, and we can all have.
I have notes. Wink, wink.
Yeah, because I'm kind of relying on you guys to have thoughts one way or the other as well. But so yeah, it's not going to necessarily be in chronological order. So obviously, spoilers if you haven't seen the film, and wouldn't necessarily be talking about the end. Only at the end, we'll be.
Why would you be here if you hadn't watched the film? If you haven't watched the film,
you really need to. You need to get out more if you haven't seen the film.
Touch grass.
Fair enough. Right, without any further ado, then I'm going to start off with my first category. And my first category is the acting in the movie, because I did want to talk about it.
Okay.
The very first note that I have is just that I think Tilda Swinton is outstanding from the very start and then throughout the movie.
Definitely.
I don't have much to add to that one, unless I was waiting for one of you to disagree, but okay. So there we go. The biggest note that I've made, I think, here is that I remember at the time the movie came out, a lot of people were comparing Strange to Tony Stark because he's very kind of much a douche in the beginning, and he's like driven by his ego, and yes, he's brilliant, but he's cocky about it, and he won't screw up his record to help people, and refers to the other guy as like bachelor's degree and has a massive level of arrogance. So I was curious if you guys thought he was a bit too Tony Stark-esque, or if you saw any differences there.
It did come across that way. I know a lot of people. I know a couple of people personally that actually hated the film. They thought it was after Civil War. They thought it was just taking a step back and going back to square one with Iron Man. There are, similarities.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Although I don't. Again, I think I'd have to rewatch Iron Man because I can't remember like that level of arrogance. Because I watched Civil War, I was like, "Are you meant to be on Captain America's side here?" And then I come to Discord and I had a conversation with you, and you were like, "Absolutely, yeah," because Tony Stark was an absolute douchebag, and I just thought, was he? And I was like, oh. So I must have misinterpreted Iron Man's character massively, like Tony Stark.
Only at the very start. I mean, Civil War aside, at the very start, he was totally like, this is how we do it. We make weapons and we get drunk and we'd be out of a job if there was any kind of peace, and we don't care about anything. And it was only when he kind of got captured and had to make the suit that he was, oh crap, what are we doing?
Yeah. But I do feel like it was maybe not too close to Tony Stark, but just like too arrogant. But then again, that feeds into like the whole theme of the movie, the overarching theme, which is like arrogance and letting go of your ego, and ultimately to become, I don't want to say a superhero, but a sorcerer and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, it's taken up your calling in the same way as any of these movies. It's the same as like Spider-Man, isn't it? You've got the responsibility now to do it, because there is the point where Strange basically says, you mean to tell me I could just go on, use the magic to channel into my hands and go back to my normal life? And the Ancient One is like, well, yes, but it would be a massive waste, because now you have all this potential to do great things. So, unlike the one guy who was just like, I'm just going to keep my spine, keeping me up.
Yeah, Pangborn.
That's right, yeah. Speaking of which, that was my next note. To basically, Benjamin Bratt is quite good in the film, but he's completely wasted because he has like 2 scenes, and one of them is a post-credit scene. So it's just kind of baffling why they had like a fairly well-known actor who did almost nothing. But having said that, next point, that's true of Rachel McAdams as well, really, isn't it? Because again, I've never understood why she's even in this movie. She doesn't have anything really to do, and the romance subplot is kind of the weakest part of the movie, I guess.
But in all fairness, to me that's just Rachel McAdams. No, I mean, no disrespect to her, but she does play a similar type quite a lot.
But even the story doesn't give them anything to do. I mean, it tries to force it in. Like at the very start, there's some very laboured stuff about, come and work with me. I don't date co-workers because of us. And then when he has his accident, he kind of, chases her away with, what have I got you? Oh, what's that about? And then, as I said, there's the brief bit of the astral projection when he has to go to her in the hospital. And then
which is a fantastic scene, by the way. Best scene of the film.
It's fantastic. It's straight from one of the comics as well, called The Oath, if anybody isn't familiar with, where almost a shot for shot from that particular graphic novel. So do check it out if you haven't had the chance.
But the thing is that I think it's a bit more than surface level, because after the whole rant about her treatment of him and like being her own project, like we get him looking at the portfolio that she gave him and with all the x-rays and stuff, so it showed that she did care. And then eventually when he was in great peril, the one place he wanted to be was in the hospital and with her. And then afterwards, about 20 minutes later, after the whole procedure and stuff, everything's successful, they share a kiss, but she kisses him on the cheek. And I thought that was quite nice. How that played out, I thought that was quite good. I wouldn't say that's labored or minute at all.
It just
when I was first watching it, I thought it was brilliantly portrayed.
I feel like personally, to me, it just seems very forced in, like it has to be there. Like there's not really even the stuff you mentioned about in the start when it's like she helps him to get on his feet, but she doesn't, because it's his physical therapist that's like, I'm going to prove you wrong and I'll show you this Pangborn guy who's done this thing. And so she's not even really useful there. So, you know what I mean? And yeah.
I would argue that she's more useful in this than Pepper was in Iron Man.
Oh, I don't agree with that. Pepper at least had a sort of, she had a purpose to those films, and she was either the CEO or she was helping Tony out with various things. And like I said, with the exception of that one scene on the operating table, Christine doesn't actually do anything really for Strange. Certainly nothing that couldn't be done by somebody else. Even that hospital scene you could give to any other character. Have it be that, he's overcome his ego and gone to his rival surgeon guy to do it if you needed to, whatever.
But I don't think it would have that. It wouldn't have as much of emotional weight.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess, just like I said, it seemed like it was a character too many, and the romance subplot for me just felt very undeveloped, I guess. And it seems like it's just been dropped. Although, obviously, we haven't seen the sequel yet, but we'll wait and see if it goes anywhere, because that was the thing about the What If episode that bothered me about Doctor Strange. Was like, oh, what if he lost the love of his life? And I was like, would he be? We have no indication that he's this level of obsessed with her. He doesn't seem all that bothered in the first movie.
But then again, I was rewatching this today and I was like, this character, like Doctor Strange, is very different than the one we see in Spider-Man No Way Home, for example. Like, they are completely different characters. So I would be very surprised if they were to go back to Doctor Strange 1, because so much has changed since then. And the only parallel I could see being brought back is the mention of the multiverse, when they were saying, if it was to break, you don't even know the dangers that would come through it. So that kind of teases to me that we could be getting an amazing threat in the upcoming film.
Definitely. I did notice that as well. I didn't notice the first time around, but yeah, there's a lot of mentions of the word multiverse very specifically in the movie. Oh, you've opened up a vast multiverse, and we channel.
I mean, it's in now. It could be any word of the film, and if it had a different meaning later on, you'd notice it more. But it was like a couple of mentions of multiverse. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, other than that, the only other acting note I had regarding Christine was that for me, she accepts the kind of astral projection Doctor Strange way too easily.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very much like, oh well, never mind. And then it gets on with her job, and I'm like, really though? You wouldn't be a bit more freaked out? But yeah.
Hey.
Again, Baron Mordo was another thing in this film that is really intriguing, but completely underplayed. And again, I don't feel like, given that we know what the sequel's doing, that it's going to really touch on that in the sequel.
No, I would have liked a bit more of Mordo, and I would have liked to him if the rumors are true about Multiverse of Madness. I think it's a bit of a waste, both of the character and the actor.
I completely agree. Yeah. So yeah, as I say, I thought some of the best scenes in the movie were like his arguments with Doctor Strange, or the actual kind of non-black and white of like, well, she's a hypocrite because she's using these powers, and is it ever really justified? And then ultimately, Strange actually appealing to him for help and him helping, but then saying, "This is the end. I'm now going completely a separate way." There was a kind of, for me, a kind of very Professor X Magneto kind of vibes in that. That was like, I've helped you, we were friends, but now I can't support this, just disobeying the natural order or whatever he calls it. So it's like, that would be a really intriguing setup for a sequel, just to have them face each other. But again, it seems
I do
like
the fact that they didn't try and make him outright evil.
Oh, completely. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like he's actually, like a lot of the best Marvel villains, he's kind of got a point. I mean, he doesn't go about it in the best way. I mean, yeah.
But I mean, I think you could level that at Caecilius. I mean, he's a bit of a git, but you can kind of see his point at times.
Yeah, but my favorite thing about that is that he basically, it's the ultimate example of poetic justice, which I kind of love when even Strange points that out. He's like, well, so what, you wanted eternal life as part of the whole? You're not going to like it. So I was like, yeah, exactly. Give him exactly what he wanted. So tough crap. Yeah. The very final thing that I've said on the acting, well, actually, there's a couple of things on the acting front. Firstly, BD Wong as Wong is great, bringing the kind of charm and the humor. We know from like future films that he's going to do that a lot, but straight away from this one, he won me over, and I think I absolutely just was like, this character's really good, and it's a character that had the chance to be a really dodgy stereotype as well. So I'm kind of glad that it didn't go that way.
Is Wong the name of the character in the comic?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because it just struck me as a massive coincidence that the actor was also called Benedict Wong.
I know, BD Wong. Yeah. It is kind of weird, but yeah. But yeah, the Wong in the comics, especially in the early ones, is very much the kind of Asian stereotype. I am your Asian assistant, sort of master kind of thing. And it's like, ooh.
Yeah, they couldn't have got away with that.
No, definitely not. But seeing that, I mean,
6 years ago, it wasn't exactly a different world back then.
No, I still think they couldn't have gotten away with that, but it's still weird to me that they completely changed, because I'll bring up this point now, because why not? They totally changed the ancient one, because that character in the comics is very much that mystical Asian with magic powers.
It's like Talons of Weng Chiang territory in the comics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah. There is sort of a Fu Manchu kind of vibe, yeah. And it's weird that, first of all, they play that mislead of that when Strange first goes there, and there's the actual dude who looks very much like that. And it turns out it's just one of the random masters that Tilda's like, oh, thank you for your time. You can go now. And I was like, oof, playing that mislead is already a little bit like on the nose. And then I was like, why did they decide to go so randomly? Like, they say, what is it? She's Celtic and she's a woman and has been in this role for years. And I'm like, what a weird place to go with it. And again, I'm not really one to comment, but I do know a lot of Asian people that were really pissed off that it was an Asian character that got replaced. So instead of doing like Wong and actually kind of bringing it into a more accepting modern place, they were just like, we'll just recast it with a white chick. And they were not happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, she's since come out saying that she can't understand why they did it, and she's not totally in favor of it.
Yeah,
but I think, I mean, she's coming for a lot of controversy, concerning the casting. But in retrospect, it's difficult to see just how they could have included the character in any form without at least some of the audience being offended.
Yeah, and I mean, I think she does a fantastic job, and she portrays it very sensitively. But as I said, I'm not really in a position to say, well, it's fine that they replaced an Asian character with a white character, you know what I mean? Which is obviously not going to look great for optics.
I mean, she plays it admirably, and in my opinion, she's got some of the best lines in the entire movie.
Definitely. Did you have any thoughts on the controversy, Will, then, before I move on?
Not really. I think you touched. You touched.
He's like, I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, I'm staying away from that.
Fair enough. I do have one last note in my acting category then, and that is just, if you guys didn't know this, I'm quite impressed by this fact that it is Benedict Cumberbatch who plays Dormammu in the film as well.
I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah, much
In
as
my
he did for,
research, I never came across that.
No, it's. I don't think he's credited, but it definitely is him doing it, much like he did like Smaug in the Hobbit and stuff.
Yeah,
He's prone to a little bit of overacting to CGI characters and stuff. So when you realize that last scene is literally Benedict Cumberbatch acting against himself, it's like, wow, that's even more impressive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, yeah, kudos to him for that, because he gets a lot of flack for this movie in various reasons, like his accent, or like I said, he's basically playing Tony Stark at the start, but I think he more than makes up for it by the end. And like I said, the fact that he played Dormammu without being credited, and a lot of people, if not pretty much everyone, wouldn't really know that fact because he was so subtle with it. Like, well, not subtle, but so not just cheesy with it, I suppose. So yeah, awesome. Right. My next category that I was going to go on to then is the direction. So bear with me. I have a few notes about this. And that is basically starting with the opening of the movie, because it was the first thing I made a note of, which was, I love that the opening scene takes place in basically silence. You can just hear like footsteps and things. And it shows to me Scott Derrickson's horror movie background, because it's like they're stalking through the library to find the guy. Then they string him up and chop his head off, basically. And I was like, woof, that is surprising as an opening to the movie for a Marvel family film, isn't it? So I was taken aback by that to start with. But then the fact that it leads from there into a straight chase through the city and the mirror world effects, and I was like, that is awesome. And that is, I fully get why you open the film with that, to show that off as soon as you can, rather than wait until Strange gets there and learns the power and whatever else. So I was like, yes, fully great decision to do that. And may as well say it now, the actual kind of special effects for the mirror world and the Inception style kind of buildings collapsing in on themselves and stuff is just fantastic.
It's stunning.
It's
really I'm going to be the detracting factor here.
Oh, go on then.
I just thought that in No Way Home, in the sequence where Doctor Strange is doing his spells and whatnot with Peter when they're fighting, that looked so much better nowadays than this. I thought this looked horrendously outdated. Not just the buildings collapsing in on itself, but just the CGI in general.
Really? I can't agree with that. I don't think
like the corridor scene as well. It just looked pretty awful, in my opinion.
Well, I will say from memory, it was a lot more impressive on the big screen than kind of the things. They do lose a little bit of impact, these kind of special effects, especially if you're watching them on a smaller and smaller TV or like on your phone or something. It's not going to have the same effect. But for me, I think the CGI is fantastic. And I mean, I've got a pretty decent sized TV and a Blu-ray, so maybe that's the reason why. But I was like, wow, it looks awesome. You know, I thought it was a really good job. And like I said, I think
it was unexpected.
I think it holds up better than Inception, which you can kind of tell, especially in the kind of hallway scene in that movie, where you can tell they're just on one of those stupid rotoscope things where they just turn the whole.
Well, obviously, when you think of it from like a technical viewpoint, but if you're just a viewer casually observing it, then it's still pretty awesome. You can tell all this was CGI though, like the same way there's a moving set. Yeah, this is obviously CGI. It's obviously not real. Obviously, Doctor Strange isn't running in a corridor that's shape-shifting. You know what I mean? He's on a green screen floor.
Definitely, the actual sort of movement of the sets and the surroundings, I think, is better than, because I see what you mean. There's a couple of moments when the characters are jumping and it's obviously like a CGI character, when it's like, all right,
yeah,
but maybe that's just, we can't really get our heads around that because it's so unnatural looking. And it didn't take me out of it as such. I was just kind of like, all right, whatever.
I'm just defending the honor of Inception. Great film.
It's a good film, don't get me wrong, but yeah, special effects wise, I would still say this one did a better job personally. That's because it does more, to be honest. It's not just a matter of like folding up one street. It's like crazy twist and turn universe, and the way that it does the MC Escher thing, like you mentioned, of like there's now stairs on like 4 different sort of walls coming at you, and the laws of physics don't apply anymore, and you're bouncing off sideways and then to the top and everything. And I just thought it was fantastic. But you know, 2 out of 3 of us, what the heck?
Yeah, I remember you.
Yeah. So you do also have to shout out the music in this movie. I should have looked up who it was, and I can't remember. I think it might be Giacchino. Because
I'll just look it up. Just give me a second.
Thank you. Because I do love the way the music kind of changes with the scene, and you can get the sense of like whether it's supposed to be now tense or it's a little bit kooky, and it always seems to fit really perfectly and help you to. I think even the lack of the music in that opening scene, not that that's praising the music.
Giacchino.
I thought it was, good. So you're talking about direction. I loved the scene when they're operating, and you get the tense moment when he's like he's really knuckling down to get the bullet out of the guy, and then says like cover your watch because he can even hear the second hands on the watch ticking. I was like, that is just brilliant. I really love that.
I think Derrickson did a really good job. I mean, obviously he's known for horror, and as you say, it starts off with the horror elements, but he transfers into what you would call a superhero film quite ably. I think he's done a fantastic job with this.
I agree. And the other thing that I noticed in terms of like directing touches is that, again, I didn't notice this at first, and well, not on a conscious level, but when watching it now, I noticed that everything to do with magic is like super bright and full color and in your face. And when it's not magical and they're just in the hospital in the opening scenes, the color palette is very kind of washed out and grayish. And it's kind of like the real world is very one note, I suppose, compared to.
I would have liked to have seen his pitch video that he did. It would have been interesting to see what Marvel saw and went, definitely we'll have this guy. I mean, it's a completely different beast to the films he's done before. Insidious, they have their elements of special effects, but they're all very small pictures. Now, when you look at the special effects on this, when, as you say, the staircase is folding out of infinity, and you just it's a wonder that anybody could get a handle on that and visualize it to such an extent to direct in that kind of setup, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because it is trippy, but the whole point is it has to be. I mean, if you look at the comics that it's based on, I think it captures that.
It
very
nails
crazy
it.
The Steve Ditko twisty turny bright everything. It captures it perfectly for me, more so than even anything else.
It's actually my favorite scene, the one where Ancient One sends him on that initial trip, just boops him on the forehead, and he's got hands growing out of his fingers and hands growing out of the end of those, and I just think this is just fantastic. It's like the comic book.
Yep, I agree, and it kind of fits into is it Aldous Huxley and all that kind of thing that like Stan Lee's reading in his cameo as well. This is
it's hilarious.
And it does fit that thing because like I just said it is a glorious trip, and you do notice all the colors and all the surrealism, and like you said, just crazy stuff like hands growing out of hands that you wouldn't expect. And then the scene that I noted, which I absolutely loved, is that like all the hands envelop him and then form into a face, but made out of hands. Yeah, I was like, that is impressive. You know what I mean? You've got to.
Talking animals are good, but this really should have won the Academy Award.
Oh, definitely. Before we've gone slightly ahead, but I should mention the crash because, again, talk about horror movie background. You feel the intensity of it, and the way they focus on the crushing of the hands, I feel that. I was like, ow, that is just flipping painful,
I just think, to me, as a fan of the comic books, I don't think they really put a foot wrong with it. Well, I mean, obviously, they got a controversy with the Ancient One, but and there's another point later, but I don't think they put a foot wrong with it, and I cannot understand for the life of me how some people who claim to be fans of the MCU have come out so dismissively against the movie, if not outright hating it. And I because to me it's one of the highlights of the MCU.
Well, to
I
be
think
fair,
they've done a fantastic job. I mean, it's not as big as some of the other films.
No, but it's an origin story. It's not supposed to be Infinity War,
So,
it's understandable.
And I think it was not necessarily misplaced, but I think after Civil War, people were expecting them to go bigger and better. So when it does come to a more personal story, end of the world personal story, but when it comes back to something as self-contained as this, I think a lot of people were maybe taken aback. That's the only way I can put it into a concept that I can understand, because to me it was just as
I say, I can only go off my own experience, but for me, everybody that I've talked to that's a fan of the character in the comic loved the movie. But a lot of people, like you say, that were just watching the MCU movies, I think it was perhaps a bit too much of a left turn into, we've been previously saying that magic is just advanced science, and now all of a sudden, nope, it's just magic.
Yeah.
And it was a lot for people to kind of take in. It's like, all right, this is a bit of a whiplash situation. So,
because I think at the start they had to do that with things like Thor, because otherwise, I think straight after Iron Man, people would be going, "This is just stupid." So you had to put that caveat in there. But now, let's just embrace it. They've taken everything else that we've given them. Let's see how far we can push this.
Yeah, and I did like the way that they tried to explain that, because for me it was kind of, it's never going to sell you completely, but the way the Ancient One explains it is like all of these different maps, whether it is, the maps of your different chakras or whatever, and your different Reiki zones combined with an actual scan of your skeleton, and she's like, that's all part of the overall whole, which is, these are snapshots of the whole thing, and once you know everything, you can tap into all kinds of crazy things, So
yeah,
I was like, okay, I can kind of get my head around that a bit easier than just there's just magic, which is like, you can see part of the puzzle, but you're not seeing the whole thing. You're not opening your eye, I guess. So, and as I say, if you're there with that comics character anyway, you're already going to be sold. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a suspension of disbelief thing, and at this point, you can take practically demigods, and you can get a millionaire flying around in an armored suit. So, why can you not just suspend disbelief just that little bit further?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, you have to eventually, like I said, to the point where we're at now, where, I mean, look at what we've had already, and it's just very much, no, you just kind of have to go with it. It's just magic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I was thinking that the other day, just watching Moon Knight. If Moon Knight had been one of the first things to come from the MCU, people would have just tuned out, in my opinion.
That's the thing. I think, like you said, the way that they brought it in gradually was a good decision. But yeah, I can't remember what it was that I was thinking of. There was some. It might have even been Eternals, where I was like, "Wow, people would never have accepted this before you had like Doctor Strange going on." And stuff,
in part, I still don't. I mean, the weird thing is, I can kind of get with the whole celestial head and hand coming out of the earth and stuff. But it's just not earned for me in Eternals. I'm really not a Harry Styles fan.
Yeah, me neither. But regardless, we've already reviewed that one. So
yeah,
carrying on with the kind of, as I was talking about the direction, and especially as we mentioned, the visual kind of flair and stuff. I do think the montage of the kind of effects when they're making the magical shields and stuff is again really cool. It was a great way to translate that, and related to that, the sling rings and how they kind of made the portals that they went through. It's a simple thing, but it could have easily kind of tripped the film up if it was bad. And I think it's really good. When they start defending the actual three sanctums, I think it's when the shifting architecture in the various sanctums as they're fighting, I think was super impressive to me as well. How it was like moving around like a maze, and you could never get your bearings on where you were, and you'd be falling down all over the place and fighting. So I loved it.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, it as I say, when I saw that in the cinema, it blew me away. Because let's be honest, in recent years, the only kind of magic that we've glimpsed is Harry Potter waving a wand around. But
speak for yourself.
The depiction of magic, it's unlike anything that I've seen on a cinema. In a cinema before, and I think completely. The film deserves kudos for that alone.
Definitely, as you say, because I mean, it's hard to think, as you say, if we've really seen anything fantastical or magical, and so there wasn't a lot of visual language to go on. And this film, it did create it, because I mean, look how many times Doctor Strange has appeared since then, and it's always the same sling ring effect and the same shields and the same, whatever else. So yeah, like you say, it created visual language. So
he's. I mean, he does get a lot of comparisons to Tony Stark, but in the last phase, he's kind of taken over Stark's position as the main MCU player.
Yeah, well, including when he took over the kind of I'm the MCU guy in a Spider-Man movie role.
Yes,
but yeah. But no,
I would argue that he worked a heck of a lot better in the Spider-Man movies than Stark.
Well, you know me, I'm a massive sucker for the fact that these are the two Steve Ditko creations. Everything else is pretty much Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and it's Spider-Man and Doctor Strange that were the Steve Ditko babies. And anytime they interact on screen together, I'm always like, yay! So yeah, Doctor Strange for me works a lot better with Spider-Man than Tony Stark does, which is a bit square peg round hole. But again, that's neither here nor there in terms of this movie, but it's just worth pointing out, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Again, one thing. It's a random point in the movie to mention, but I just love the glorious shot when he's defending the New York Sanctum, and the cape has kind of chosen him, I guess. And there's a fantastic shot of him like levitating up against the window with the seal of Vishanti on it, which I was like, oh, that's your superhero moment right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing actually when they start defending the New York sanctuary, as I think I mentioned, the whole mirror dimension stuff and everything is just, it's epic. And I say it's telling that that's where you get a Stan Lee cameo when they're chucked against the side of a bus and he's reading, like I said, Brave New World or something along them lines, like some reality trip kind of book, and just laughing about like, this is so weird. You know?
Yeah. In my research, actually, I found he filmed that along with 3 others in one day.
Yeah, I think he used to do a lot of that. Yeah,
yeah. But
awesome.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't find fault with the effect whatsoever. There's a design thing, as I say, but we'll probably get to that later on. But
yeah, I can't personally, but obviously, as you say, Will, we have lost Will, by the way, listeners. If I'm editing this at this point, you probably will notice an absence because he's having connection issues. We're hoping to get him back, but if not, well, he was here for a little while. So, but yeah, I can see, not everybody's on board with the effects, and that's fair enough. It's a differing point of view, but for me, I don't think.
In Will's defense, I mean, Inception did come first, and
yeah.
It's Strange probably built on the success of the effects in Inception.
Definitely, but there is more to it when you look at, like you said, you already mentioned the way that everything shifts, and like you said, the MC Escherism of it all and everything. It's a step above just it's a street folding in on itself, as I said, which is there is that, but then it's the whole fact that every bit of architecture becomes a mad trip that's reflected within itself multiple times, and yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it, especially that last thing.
How, to me alone, the planning of directing with a green screen that's supposedly displaying things like that,
completely,
phenomenal.
Definitely.
I don't think I mean, people slag off the MCU films as not being cinema, not mentioning any names, but the amount of work by professionals that goes into these things, and I think people are unnecessarily dismissive.
Oh, completely.
When you see what goes into these movies.
Definitely. And I mean, yeah, none more so than this particular movie, you know what I mean? Because, as I say, I think Scott Derrickson doesn't get nearly enough credit because this is a behemoth of a directing task, and he more than did a good enough job. And it's a shame, as much as I'm with everybody else, that I love the idea that we're getting Sam Raimi for the sequel, and it's going to be cool to see him again and his sensibilities meshing with Doctor Strange. I do also lament the loss of Scott Derrickson because he did such a good job in this first one. So,
is there any reason? Do you know if that Derrickson wasn't given this version?
He was given the sequel, and he basically dropped out due to they always say, creative differences.
Oh right, so there's a chance that he may not be back.
Yeah, well, he's really active on Twitter, and he's never had any animosity. So, like when the trailer and stuff came out, he's always said like Sam is the perfect man for the job. In fairness. No kind of bitterness towards him, and I absolutely cannot wait to see what he does with the movie. No shade whatsoever. It was just it wasn't my creative vision, and I can kind of see in a way what he's talking about. Like you can't always with these things, but I think from interviews and stuff he did at the time, he'd mentioned that if there was going to be a sequel, he wanted to kind of deal with nightmare and have it be like in this nightmare realm and everything, and a more personal kind of story, and to have that in mind and then be told by the MCU, no, you're now doing this crazy multiverse spending trip of a movie that juggles multiple characters and stuff. It's kind of like, nah, that wasn't the film I set out to do, So,
yeah, they are very much at the whims of the higher ups when it comes to this. Yeah. It would have been nice had we had the time for maybe part 2 to have dealt with Nightmare and dealt a little more with Mordor.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when you look at it, it's kind of weird that somebody brought this up the other day and it completely blew my mind. There's been an entire Spider-Man trilogy in between Doctor Strange movies. Cool.
What have I missed?
We were just talking about the direction, so I was just about to kind of finish off my thoughts on that. So if you had anything, like any thoughts you wanted to make specifically about the direction or any notes, then now would be the time to mention them before your Wi-Fi breaks again.
Well, it's also to do with the editing. I like how the film cut from facial reactions to another. Like it didn't cut from like set pieces to set pieces. It always went to like a close-up shot, and then it cut to another close-up shot in a different scene. I noticed that a lot. And yeah, I quite liked that decision. Otherwise, I like the action scenes. I don't like the CGI, but again, that's the effects team, that not so much the direction and the director himself, but or herself or themselves. But yeah, the action was all right. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the scene, is it called the Astro Bodies?
The
Astral projections,
plane,
yeah.
or the astral projection, yeah.
That thing, the one in their operating theater, even though, you know, the acting is a bit crummy from the woman who's just surprised.
Rachel.
He's not even surprised that well, she just dismisses it straight away. Except from that, that's such a fantastic scene because of the direction. And yeah, I do love, again, I love the kind of action with the faces. So yeah, that's all I've really had on the direction, to be honest.
That's fair enough. Well, the only other things I had was that I mentioned I love the way that it does the kind of reversing of time. So that it, for example, when you first see it, it kind of, the apple that he's eating gets reconstituted and it kind of goes back and forth. And I think that's a really cool way to show that. And then the cleverness of showing that, like, the missing pages by going back in time to when they were there. I was like, all right, that's kind of, I can do this.
The Apple one was all right, but I'd be interested to know how it looks if you actually like slowed it down to see how they did it, because I just thought, honestly, it was like a pan to the right when the apple was being taken away, and then it just panned to the left, like it was in reverse when it was coming back. I thought, I wonder if they had actually just reversed it and changed the sound effects to just save money, you know? I doubt it, but
I don't think so. I think it's just that's the visual language of the time stone, is that it's moving like a clock. So as I say, it's kind of panning anti-clockwise for one thing and clockwise for the other. But again, I could be reading too much into that. Because I do recall that's vaguely what happened in Infinity War when Thanos used the time stone. It did a similar thing. But anyway, the very last thing I had anyway about the direction was that, kind of related to what you were saying, it's a directing and an editing thing, is that I like that they tried to point out the visual language of what was going on in the final scene, because every time that Doctor Strange pops back into the dark dimension or whatever, it zooms in on him before it gives you the whole Dormammu, I've come to bargain. And the fact that that's a repeated shot really clues you in that you're into a time loop before you even really know what's happening, if that makes sense. Because you're like, it's the same shot over and over and over again. Which, yeah, I appreciated that to get that across. So, yeah, awesome. Yeah. Right, the next thing then was, I've only got a few notes on this, but it's basically just things that relate to the writing. Let me see, I've already mentioned that, unfortunately for me, Christine was underwritten and didn't get a lot to do. I've kind of mentioned most of this, actually. The only other thing is, I really thought it was quite clever that they, that the way they wrote the kind of medical jargony bit at the start, where it's like, this guy, he's already been declared dead, and then Strange works out that no, because it's a perfect bullet or whatever, and it's coated in something, that it would be perfectly contained and you could still remove it and save the guy's life. I was like, all right. I mean, you're not a medical movie, but I can dig what you're going for, yeah.
Yeah. They must have done some research into it, the whole science of it, though, because they do delve into that quite a lot.
Yeah. The only other point that I had regarding this, and it's kind of, I'd be interested to know, especially your thoughts, DK, because you were touching on it earlier, is just, what do you think about Mads Mikkelsen as the villain in this movie? Is he impactful or is he a bit wasted?
I know a lot of people say that he's been wasted, but I think he does a good performance. It would have been nice to see a bit more of him, but you know, if he's signed on for one movie and he's not Mordo, that's what we're going to get. You do kind of see his point. I mean, he's a complete asshole about it, but yeah, and he comes across. I mean, he always comes across as a menacing threat. He's Mikkelsen, for God's sake.
Ever since Casino Royale, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you, but for me, I just think it's unfortunate that he's undercut because he's never the main threat. Because as soon as Dormammu enters the picture, it's kind of like that was what it was building up to, and Caecilius and the Acolytes are kind of the warm-up act, I guess, for the bigger threat.
Again, it would have been nice to see the entire Caecilius Dormammu Mordo thing, as we were saying earlier, spread out over a couple of movies.
Definitely, yeah. But as I say, they're in a rush to get to the multiverse, so what can you do?
And I'm not sure I like that, to be honest. It smacks a bit that. I mean, yeah, they've been successful, especially in No Way Home, but when they're always rushing to get to a certain point, it smacks of Zack Snyder's Justice League to me, and that always makes me worry.
So yeah, the next thing that I was going to touch on was just individual scenes and things. We've talked about a few of them already, but let's see, where was I? The first sort of thing I've noticed that we haven't talked about is that I didn't realize the first kind of couple of times I saw the movie that you get a shot of Dormammu quite early on when Caecilius uses the kind of dark magic ritual. And I can't believe I missed that in the first couple of viewings because it's not subtle, if you know what I mean. But I did like it. It was really cool. The next note I have is just, it was really bloody harsh that they just ditched him on Everest to die if he hadn't been able to use the sling ring. I was like, this does not sit well with me.
But then when he was doing that, they were both like the Grey Swords, and they were just willing him to return, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she would necessarily have left him there fully to die. It was kind of like, you could tell she was like, come on, you could do it, kind of thing. But it still seemed like a really harsh tactic. And I was like, all right, maybe, take it a bit slower than that. But what about you, DK? What's your thoughts on that one?
I guess it's just, like a parent trying to teach the child to swim by throwing him in the deep end kind of thing.
Don't do that to your children, people, if you're listening. Please.
No, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Like, it's like water initiation. You just chuck your baby into water and then they float.
No, I don't know if that's true.
You laugh. That's a thing. That is a thing. Yeah. I'll YouTube it. DK, you can back me.
Can't you? Yeah, definitely.
Kids, you see.
You're not supposed to tie a brick to them first, Mike.
Oh, wait, do I have the sack first?
But I just anyway, saw the kind of like magical version of that. I guess,
I get it.
After a while, the ancient one were going, okay, he's looking like a popsicle. We'll go back for him.
Yeah, fair enough.
Infant self-rescue.
What were you saying, Will?
It's called infant self-rescue. So if a baby or a kid's drowning, they'll have the instincts to float.
Okay, well, there you go. We've learned something new every day. And after listening to this podcast, only 7 babies will have died.
This podcast has now been banned in several countries.
Quick, don't talk about any LGBTQ characters or we'll get banned everywhere else.
From Egypt and Western world.
Where was I? I've mentioned it already, but the attack on the sanctums in London and New York are really cool, and especially when the cloak basically finds Strange and connects to him as his like magical object. I was like, I love the cloak of levitation.
Yeah,
I was giving serious consideration to making that my favorite character, even though it's a freaking cape. Because I just think it's so good.
I don't want to disagree, but I absolutely disagree.
Oh,
it's such a get out of jail card, though. It's like,
of course it is. It's a magical item.
Mortal danger. Here's a bloody. What do you call it?
It's the cloak of levitation.
Cloak. Yeah, like when he actually levitates and is like on his back, and that's a cool moment. But like when he's in the actual battle scenes, there's the cloak again, like doing all his story work.
It's his thing because I mean they did build it up by saying there's all kinds of different magical relics, and then named like the vaulting boots of Valtor and the whatever of the wand of Matum and the staff of the living tribunal, and it's like fair enough. There's all these things that you can use. And in his case, the one relic or whatever that chose him was the cape. And it was like, all right, fair enough. Yeah. It's a cool choice. And I like the way that it was animated and stuff. I think, like I said, for a live action movie, it was actually given quite a lot of character. And again, even referring back to the parts of like, some people might not like the dodgy jokes and stuff, but I just loved when he was trying to do the kind of superhero type pose and it completely undercut him by the cape, just like tagging his neck with or something with one bit. And he's like, stop it, get down. I love that. But I'm guessing Will, not a fan. What was I going to say? I love that when they get to the final act to Hong Kong, the sanctum has already fallen. Because it was quite a surprise. And then that they use the clever thing they've set up of using the time stone to reverse it so that it's kind of unmucked up, I guess.
Again, that was a fantastic special effects sequence where he's rewinding time and trapping them in the walls. And
yes. That was my next note. Yeah, the way that it's walls up Caecilius was a really cool thing. And it does the kind of frozen time matrix camera panning past you and everything kind of coolness. So, I love that.
The more we talk about it, the more I'm convinced that Scott Derrickson is some kind of wonderkind. Because, as I say, going from small intimate horror movies to something with this many special effects, and we've kind of been desensitized to special effects because it's the MCU, for goodness sake, regardless of the other franchises that we've watched along the years. But the amount of really nice shots in this movie. And it's a very difficult thing to achieve with the amount of special effects that everybody's been subjected to see something that is unique and that you are genuinely impressed by. It's a feat in itself. And I think moving from those small horror movies to something this big, he's done a fantastic job. It is good that it's nice to see a bit of diversity with regards to directors, because you cannot always go to your Spielbergs.
No.
It's nice that they're giving directors from more low budget productions a chance.
Yeah, we've kind of mentioned a lot of the other stuff because, like, Will's already touched on, he really liked the scene from the Oath comic of the levitation or the astral projection, which definitely is good and very impressive. It's worth pointing that out. Didn't love the scene where Caecilius is just monologuing for ages. Because I thought that was a little bit like, all right, calm down. We're getting a bit... we know what you're doing here. And, yeah, it is very much like, let me tell you my evil plan. I'm not really evil, I'm misunderstood. And then you just think, I've just put like, look at your face, dude. You know what I mean?
You really need to get some sleep.
Exactly. Like, we're not evil, we just have this incredibly cracked skin all around our eyes and what looks like a mark made of blood on our forehead. That makes us the good guys, doesn't it? But anyway, I have to talk about the other thing because it's probably my favorite, not to spoil anything, but my favorite scene, which is the unexpected kind of death of the Ancient One, where she gets stabbed in the midst of the battle, and it actually is her end. They try to take her to the hospital and stuff, but she like astrally projects out of her body and has the most glorious scene with Strange when she talks about that you'd think she'd be ready, but she's stretching this moment into
so she can watch the snow.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like I said, the fact that this is his Uncle Ben scene, because it's where she's like, in your future, I see possibilities and you can do what you want, but it would be a great loss because you have such potential and you have to learn the great lesson, which is just that, what he says something along the lines of, I'm the best because I'm terrified of failing, so I have to do well. And she's like, no, it's the fear of failure that it's precisely what keeps you from being the best. Yeah. And that's why it's all the more impactful at the end when he's like, yeah, I can't win, but I can just lose over and over again. So, which is a perfect summation of like, he's finally overcome the ego. And it's like, who cares if I'm losing constantly because I'm still doing the right thing and saving the world after the end of it. So, you know.
And as you said the other night, it's nice to see a film that doesn't end in a slugfest. It's nice to see someone using their intelligence to defeat the big bad rather than...
It's such a cool scene as well, the fact that...
Punch it to oblivion.
Yeah, the way that it's acted and the way that dialogue in that scene gets me every time when, like I said, maybe it's the acting, the writing, I don't know, but it's really impactful for me when he's like, you can't possibly win. No, I can lose again and again. You'll spend an eternity dying. Well, pain's an old friend. You know? And he's just basically admitting, like, I don't care because I'm protecting everything else. So, you know, I've brought time and you're now trapped in this. And I've come to bargain, but yeah, I love that the way that all kind of comes together, especially with the Ancient One.
And I did like the many deaths. That was very Doctor Strange comic book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love the way that Tripoli kind of like. There's at one point when he's back in the time loop as he hasn't even kind of like disappeared from his death the first time because it's going around so quickly, and I'm like, that is so like it's zooming in on him coming back before it's fully like his dead body's left the scene. And I was like, that is kind of cool.
Yeah. The one thing that I wasn't totally on board with, and that's the only thing, is the look of Dormammu.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was very evocative of the comic character.
I remember. I prefer the old flaming head type portrayal.
It was never really like that, though. To be fair.
I don't know. If
you do that, I think you're at risk of people confusing it with Ghost Rider or something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can understand why they did it, but I had an expectation throughout the movie of what Dormammu was going to appear like. So when I did
Yeah.
see him, he seemed more towards the Thanos side of the spectrum, if you know what I mean.
I think I get what you mean. Like the purple coloring perhaps wasn't the greatest, but I was still surprised how faithful it was with the weird like dissected lines down the face and everything. You know, I was like,
yeah, I like
can dig
that.
it.
Like I said, I would have just preferred. Again, it's just my expectation as to what I was waiting for. But you know, we have seen worse alterations to big bads. Silver Surfer.
Yeah. Well, Galactus, not Silver Surfer, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. Actually, I think it was so well acted for me by Cumberbatch as Dormammu as well. I was kind of on board with it anyway. And the fact that, like I said, if you look at it as when we presumably both saw it on the big screen, when it zoomed out and you had that sense of scale, which is something I've written down a lot with this movie, the sense of scale is so impressive that I think I was just like, whoa, this gigantic head filling the entire screen is now like, what are we going to do to take me on? And you're just like, what is he going to do? Oh, I've brought you time. There you go. Now what are you going to do? It's like, all right, okay. As you said, it's like, it's clever because you can't possibly imagine, like, what's he going to do? Like, what magic can he do against this gigantic, like, 500-foot face in the sky that's like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Talk. So the last sort of section that I've got, well, there's a few actually still yet, but I'll try and get through them as quick as I can. So yeah, the next thing I have is just some various themes, which again, to be honest, I've kind of touched on them all. So it's kind of like, is the Ancient One a hypocrite, or is that life just not always that black and white? She does mention that she hated taking power from the Dark Dimension, but it was always kind of necessary to do, I guess.
I'm kind of on the side of it's not strictly black and white.
Yeah, I think the same, because then at the very end, it's like the supposed breaking of the natural order by Strange is what saves everything, and yet it's weird that Mordo is still just like, no, we've still done a bad thing here just to save everything, and I can't be on board with it. And I'm like, surely if anything, it should teach you that like you can't always obey all the rules, or
yeah. But when
like
people cling to an ideology, that's
exactly
what it is. That's exactly why I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that in the second.
Definitely, and as I say, don't think we're going to get that in multiverse, but you never know, I guess. So, but no, I've already said. Where was I? Learning humility is obviously a key thing. We've mentioned that. Yes, this is an origin story, but it's brilliant in the way that it adapts the comic book mythos. Because again, it doesn't get mentioned enough, but things that have been in place for years, like Doctor Strange is a doctor whose hands get crushed, and that devastates him to the point that he wants to go and find a new way to be able to do his job, and that's when he comes across magic and stuff. This is stuff that was written by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko like decades ago, and they're adopting it really faithfully and sticking to that mythos, and I think that's worth a little bit of kudos as well, you know, because it still works. This is a key kind of theme that I wanted to bring up because I did notice it as well, is that because of the accident, his watch is smashed, and it never occurred to me that is so important that it's literally in the Multiverse of Madness trailer. It's still talking about like that smashed watch representing like smashed time, which is a key theme of the movie, but it also kind of makes the seal of Vishanti symbol that's on the sanctum window. And I'm like, this is so multi-layered. And at first I was just like, it's just a broken watch. Who cares?
Yeah.
But now I'm like, this is clearly like, this is a key visual touchstone to everything. And the fact that it's the watch that was given to him by Christine, and it has like time will tell how much I love you or something as well. I'm like, all right, if this ties in back to her in a really cool way in the sequel and stuff, I could forgive quite a lot. So we'll wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, we've kind of got our hopes hanging quite a lot on this sequel.
Yeah, well, as is always the way, but yeah. The other things I've written down are just kind of key lines that I think is self-explanatory, but they kind of hit a lot of the themes. So it's things like, forget everything you think you know. We never lose our demons. We only learn to live above them. Which I think is such a cool like lesson that you can imagine it being on like a famous quotes calendar or something is like inspirational. Like, oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Silence your ego and your power will rise. Again, that's just a theme of the movie. I love that Doctor Strange takes a moment to actually point out the consequence of like, he does not like that he killed somebody. That first kind of threat when he's defending one of the sanctums, he's like, you know, I came for your help, and now there's actually somebody, I've killed someone, and I'm not happy about this, you know. And I was like, all right, I'd like that the movie takes, even if it's the briefest of times, takes the time to be like, this guy is not just a a heartless, immoral killer, and that's not what
Well,
he
no,
wants
I
the
mean
power for.
he's medically trained. It's first do no
Exactly.
harm.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
he's,
which
he's
he points
gone.
out. Yeah, definitely. No, he does say that, doesn't he? Like, I took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm, and
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still nice that it addresses that, and not just like, now that I have the power, I will use it. Ha ha ha.
It is nice to, as you say, see a superhero film where they don't turn into an amoral killer and crack a line as somebody buys it.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that did bug me about the first Iron Man movie, is that, like, once he supposedly has a change of heart, the first thing he does is jet off
blowing
to
people up left,
Afghanistan
right, and center.
like, blow up a city with the armor, and I'm like, dude, what the? You've learned nothing.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Anyway, I've kind of mentioned the rest of the stuff, which is, like I said, the key thing for me is definitely the dialogue, and I couldn't like look up the whole thing because it's a whole scene. But if you get a chance to look up the scene between Strange and the Ancient One, I think that is where the keystone of the movie is in that scene, and everything you need to know is kind of there, and it is just so beautifully acted, and it does bring me to tears, I think, almost every time I watch it. So
the one where the Ancient One's dying.
Yeah, when she's basically looking out the window, as you said, and she's like, I'm stretching it out so that I can watch the snow, and you can see the lightning like moving very slowly across the sky. And she's, like I said, she's giving the Uncle Ben speech almost to Strange of like, I can't see past this moment, but I can see possibility for you, and Mordo doesn't understand, but you might get it, and all the rest of it. So
I couldn't have pictured her in an MCU film prior to this, and now this film just wouldn't be the same without her.
She's fantastic. She's brilliant. I mean, it was kind of a nice surprise to see her back in Infinity War. Oh, sorry, in Endgame as well. When they go to the Sanctum, and she's still there because obviously it's before like Strange has even been recruited or anything. So she's the one that kind of telling Bruce Banner about the timelines and the Infinity Stones and stuff. So that's kind of cool. The other thing I've written here then is that what were your thoughts on Mordo's kind of post-credit scene? Because again, it seemed to be setting up something that we just don't seem
that we're not going to get
in doing. Yeah, like what was that about?
I liked it. I honestly thought it was going to lead somewhere. And as much as everyone's getting excited about Multiverse of Madness, what worries me is that everyone's getting excited for the cameos in Multiverse of Madness, and not necessarily the story as much.
Well,
whereas where it were leading down that road, it felt like the story was taking precedence, and that's what's got me a little nervous with regards to the sequel.
Yeah, I mean, I could still forgive it if they kind of put it on the back burner, but then address this in a third movie, because it does look worryingly to me like the Mordo that we've seen in all of the Multiverse of Madness stuff is a variant. It's not like the one we know, if that makes sense. So I have a weird kind of...
I've heard something about Multiverse of Madness, which I don't want to go into until I've seen it, but it kind of put, if it's true, it kind of puts a, I mean, yes, it's comics, but it kind of puts a dead end on everything that we've seen with regards to Mordo. And again, it makes me a little nervous, and I wish we get to see Derrickson's sequel.
Yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, it's just that seemed to be, for me, it's setting up such a cool idea, because I don't know if you've seen Serenity, the movie, the like Firefly continuation, but Chiwetel Ejiofor as the villain in that is so good. And the idea that he could be doing something similar to that as Mordo once he finally breaks, not bad as such, but you know what I mean, decides to kind of be on the opposing side.
He can play a fantastic villain.
Definitely. Well, not even a villain. I mean, the moral complexity even of the character in Serenity, when he's like, look, I don't have a place in this world that I'm trying to make, because I'm clearly a bad dude, but I'm also wise enough to know that I'm not stupid. So like, can you imagine him playing that kind of nuance and that kind of complexity?
I would love it. And I thought that's what we were going to get. And
yeah.
I mean, it was a pleasant surprise to see him, played from the beginning as an ally of Strange, rather than just go into the villainous side straight away.
Yeah.
But it feels like we're never going to get that character development, and it's a real shame, especially when you've got an actor of that caliber.
Yeah, that's fair enough. My next section, I've just basically made a list of all the jokes, because like I mentioned earlier, the MCU gets a lot of flack for like, oh, cheesy jokes, take you out of it. And I'm like, no, when they're good, they kind of really like enhance a movie. So the ones I've noted here, the very first one, irrelevant, the man charted a top 10 hit with the flugelhorn from the naming the music at the start. Brilliant. What's in that tea? It's just tea. Pause with a little honey. It's awesome.
I like the Caecilius one. How long have you been at Kamatage, Mr. Doctor, Mr.
Yeah.
Doctor, it's strange, maybe, but who am I to judge?
Who am I to judge? Yeah, I love that. I do absolutely love it. We've already touched on this, but like, oh, it's just Wong. What, like Adele or Drake? And then as he comes to the library later, like, try me Beyonce. It's awesome. Other things like, sorry, go ahead.
They're delivered in a very droll manner, and I do like that. I'd take the jokes from this one over, that's America's ass any day of the week.
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. The only other ones I've said is like, it's perhaps a little bit hokey, but I love the fact that the astral projections, like fighting each other, going through the vending machine causes like an extra bag of chips or whatever to drop, and that other surgeon guy to be like, oh, wow, cool.
Yeah.
It's so like innocuous but funny. And as much as we've talked about Christine's response to things being a little bit too easy to take, I do like that she's like, oh, so you're telling me you ran off and joined a cult? And he explains everything, and she's like, yeah, sounds exactly like a cult.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not a cultist. That's exactly what a cultist would say.
Yeah, exactly. But, yeah, so that's all more or less that I've got for that. So then, with that in mind, I wanted to go on. I was going to ask for yours and my own favourite character, moment, and line. So, Will, what was your favourite character in the movie then?
It would have to be Wong or Drake
awesome.
or Beyonce, Eminem. Yeah, it's got to be Wong. My man Wong.
It's a fair choice for the fun value and stuff, yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Even though my favorite line would be a different character, can I jump to that?
You absolutely can, yeah. What's your favorite line?
That's the Wi-Fi code. We're not savages.
I love that joke.
He's took one of mine.
Oh, no way.
For all the grief that MCU films get for this comedy, I think this film absolutely nailed the comedy.
Yeah, what's your favorite moment or scene in the movie?
Will has such good taste.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
I knew that. Thank you for confirming that.
What was your favorite moment or scene in the movie, Will?
Oh, wait, me?
Yes.
Oh, I already told you the operating scene.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that would be that would be
my favorite scene of the film. Yeah,
that makes sense. That's a thing that was already kind of storyboarded by the comics and stuff, and it is really cool. And the fact that they have the astral bodies and things working. So yeah, awesome. So Will, did you want to give us your conclusion and your score out of 5 stars?
Okay, as for conclusion, I don't have one. But yeah, honestly, I was pleasantly surprised going back to this film, because when I watched it for the first time last year, I really enjoyed it. But that was all relative, because for about 3 months of my life, I was literally just watching MCU, and that was it, because I had to get through like 25, 26 films.
Yeah, exactly.
Add the peer pressure of Michael here. So no, I'm joking. But well, it kind of was peer pressure, but I still did it.
I think I was pushing drugs on you or something.
Well, it's still 3 months of my life that, and so basically, when I watched Doctor Strange, I was basically comparing it to, God knows, Civil War, whatever film came before. So I was on a high from that. So, and I think the curve is definitely there. And however, I still had fun. I still think the writing was good. I love the initial car crash sequence, but it's a shame that they ruined it with doing the slow-mo. Typical superhero cliche right there. Add slow-mo for absolutely no reason. I didn't mind the slow-mo of the hands being crushed.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That part I think was very impactful, but
that was needed. Not needed, but you didn't need Doctor Strange and the airbag coming out, and I thought, that was a bit crap. But that scene was fantastic. Some other scenes stand out, but otherwise, it's just not very. The CGI doesn't hold up. But I know you guys massively disagree.
We disagree, but
yeah, but 6 out of 10.
Well, we go out of 5, so
oh bloody hell! I say
3 stars.
3 from me. 3 stars.
3 stars. Okay, yes. Fair enough. That's your score. That's fair enough. Right. Okay.
Favorite character? I think it's gonna have to be Ancient One.
Right. Fair enough.
Favorite scene? I already told you that one earlier. That where she, bumps him on the forehead and sends him spinning.
Yes, the trippy scene.
Yeah, and I've got 3 lines, but I'm gonna go with the one you've already mentioned it. The we never lose our demons, Mordo. We only learn to live above them.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a cool inspirational thing. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Mine are very similar to yours in a lot of ways. My favorite character is also the Ancient One, which is really weird considering the controversy and stuff. But I think she anchors this film in such a way. And again, a lesser actress than Tilda Swinton would have been a liability, maybe. But I think she's so good in this. But as I did mention earlier, the Cloak of Levitation was a close second and was considered for my favorite character. My favorite scene is, of course, it's the end scene. Dormammu, I've come to bargain, and everything that entails. All of him realizing his place is to just lose and not have the ego about it, and like you say, defeating the villain with smarts instead of a big shootout or a fisticuffs or whatever. It's just so cool. But I will say, pretty much every one of the mirror fights was also considered because I just love them as well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie to look at.
Oh, definitely, 100%. My favorite line is just. Again, close would be things like pain's an old friend or no, but I can lose at the end. But in the end, I had to go with, as I said, because it is the central theme of the film, summed up in a line, and it has to be when the Ancient One just says, you haven't learned the most basic lesson of all. It's not about you. And I was like, oh, well, that
was going to be my second choice of lines.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading something on Twitter by Scott Derrickson where somebody would mention that was a really powerful reading or something of that, and he was like, that is because that is the key theme of the film. Before we go on to the audience interaction, then we may as well do our conclusions and scores. So we'll start with you. Why not, DK?
It's a film that seems to go unnoticed by a lot of MCU fans, and some of them downright hate it. And coming so soon after Civil War, I can kind of see where they're coming from, because it does put that breather in events and takes you back to a kind of proto Iron Man situation. But I think it's important that it did that. I mean, at the time, I believe Marvel said, right, we're not going to do any more origin stories in these movies. And then the very first movie after that was this one. But I think it's important because what a lot of people didn't think about how integral Strange was going to be to the movies going forward.
Definitely.
I mean, it's visually, it's a stunning film. I know Will doesn't agree, but I love the special effects. I can't fault them. And even now when I watch it, as I say, I watched it earlier in the week, and they're still incredibly impressive. The directing's fantastic. Cumberbatch is amazing as Strange, even if they had approached someone else. I mean, I remember Joaquin Phoenix, yes, he's a good actor, but he wouldn't have embodied the character as much as Cumberbatch has, in my opinion. The supporting cast are all played incredibly well, including, as I say, Mads Mikkelsen, who, some people will say he's a little wasted, but I think he plays the role brilliantly. When I sat there in the cinema, I just had a big grin on my face for 2 hours. It was just, it was being lost in Marvel for 2 hours, and I can't really find fault in that. And to me, it's always going to be, personally, one of the highlights of the MCU. And we have a lot of films to choose from now, but to me, it stands out. It's a solid 4 out of 5 for me.
4 out of 5.
I would have gone 4.5, but I don't want to over egg the pudding. But I'm definitely going to go with at least a 4.
That's fair enough. So we've got a 3 and a 4. So I will give my conclusion and score now. And I just said, I don't know where to start. It's a brilliantly written film with themes deeper than you might expect. An absolute visual marvel, no pun intended, in more ways than one, incorporating mind-bending action physics, surreal imagery, and a gorgeous color palette. Stunning direction, mostly brilliant performances, and a faithful adaptation of one of comics' weirdest characters. Not perfect, as I mentioned, there are some wasted actors and characters, not least Rachel McAdams as Christine. But for the sheer impact of scenes like the Ancient One's death, or the ingenuity of a totally unique MCU ending, amongst many other reasons, I still personally have to give it a very high score. And I did go with 4.5 out of 5.
All right.
So, yeah. Scores of 3, 4, and 4.5. The overall podcast score has decided that Doctor Strange is 3.83 stars out of 5. So as close to 4 as I think we could potentially.
Yeah, I think we should round that up.
Well, yeah, maybe. Let's leave it informally up to the audience, because I'm going to call that 4 if Will wasn't as stingy, but never mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's fair enough. And so all that remains now then is for me to conclude, as I always do, with the audience response. Excuse me. I was collating this earlier. There wasn't a lot, but I do have it handy. There's only 5 responses, unfortunately. We have to really do more, I think, to get people involved in this, but get engaged. But I will read these out. The first one is from The Ghost Monument, who just said, I love this film and I can't wait for Multiverse of Madness. At Dr. 12 says, I enjoyed it and I'm definitely looking forward to the sequel, mainly because I'm curious about what Sam Raimi's going to do with this material. At Tom Sly says, I really enjoyed it, massively underrated. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Where are we? Thanos W says, love it. Also love the fact that not one gun is shown or fired in the movie, which, again, yeah, not something that gets mentioned a lot. But
yeah, it's a good point.
Definitely. And at Daryl Gerard Morrissey just says, possibly the best origin story in the MCU after Iron Man. Yeah, I like a lot of them. I love Captain America, the first Avenger, and I like the first Thor, not that it's an origin and stuff, but definitely I can see why you would say that regarding this movie. So, yeah, only 5 responses, but all positive. So you can't really say fairer than that or complain about it. So if anybody has any other thoughts about Doctor Strange, if you've listened to this, then by all means, feel free to leave it on our social medias or in the comments of this video or anything. So, yeah, and that will conclude this Doctor Strange review. So, DK, did you have anything you wanted to plug, or just your social media?
Just my social media can still be found on AKA Starlord.
Fair enough. Because he's not here, he's unfortunately dropped out because of tech issues. I'll point out that Will is at Will_Templar or at Who Gameshows on Twitter, or you can go to the Who Gameshows YouTube channel and find him there as well. And you can find Will Who Gameshows on YouTube, or he also does a film podcast called the BigScreenPodcast. Excuse me. You can find our podcast here at podcast_screen or Silver Screen Podcast on YouTube, or just search Marvel Man Mike as the URL. I am at Iron Mike Wilson, or just my name. And if you want to check out our sister podcast, Hit or Miss Star Trek, we are on hiatus at the moment, but that is at HOM Trek or Hom Trek. So,
and we have some good stuff coming up on that one.
We will be back next week with the second part of our top 10 Marvel movies. That is our number 5 to 1 and the combined total. The week after that, we'll be back with a review of the sequel to this, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And we'll conclude this first half of season 2 with a review of Top Gun the week after. So yeah, all that remains for me to say is thank you, Will, who is no longer with us here. Not dead, just not able to make the end of the recording. So thanks for joining us, Will, for as much as you could. Thanks again to my co-host, TK.
And thanks to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. And yeah, stay tuned. And remember, in the epic words of Arnie, I'll be back.